Hello, everyone. Having a good conference so far? It's the last talk. Only 30 minutes. There's a lot of interesting stuff to cover. I just finished a talk back there, so let me first talk about what you just missed over there. What we're going to do here is that we're going to write a mobile app. And the aim was that I'm going to write an end-to-end mobile app. And the end-to-end mobile app obviously requires a backend and a front end. And the thing about the backend is that nobody's ever interested in the backend. That didn't sound right. So nobody is ever interested in the backend, so they put me in a smaller room with a lesser audience, and the technologies we used over there were ASP.NET, OWIN, OAuth, MVC, Web API, etc. But the cool thing is that once such a backend is written, then you can write the front end in whatever language you want. So this is the second part of that conversation where I'm going to write the front end, and specifically, I'm going to write a mobile app. So the technologies that we need to be familiar with, a quick show of hands. How many of us here have played with AngularJS in any way, shape, or form? OK, many of us. OK, great. So I won't spend a lot of time on the basics of AngularJS. But even if you are not familiar with AngularJS, you should check them out a little bit. I'll start with some introductions of what we've done so far and a little bit about who I am. My name is Sahil Malik. I've been a Microsoft MVP for 12 years, authored 16 books. I need to update that slide. I have courses on Pluralsight. I have a course coming up on January 19th, end-to-end, 5 days on the JavaScript you wish you knew. As in, I'm going to cover JavaScript, the next level basics, and then AngularJS, jQuery, etc. And what we covered in the last lecture over here, in the last talk over there, is that so far I have written the backend. The backend that I wrote did one interesting thing, that it obviously allowed you to authenticate using OAuth, but the logic of the backend was that it just showed you one line of text. It returned a string. A simple REST API call returned a string, but the logic was that it would connect to my Office 365 site, and it would get me the title of the site. So without diving into the details of how we did that, because that was for the last talk, let's look at how to call that backend one more time before we start diving into the front end, how to actually write the app. So here is the backend. I've already hosted it on IIS, and this is the code for it, etc. So we're not going to worry about what that code looks like. We'll just see how the backend looks like when you call it. So let's go to apps. I'm going to use a Google app called Postman. Postman allows me to compose a REST request and make a call. This is the API that we wrote in the last session over there is basically a REST-based API that understands OAuth 2 authentication. So the step one is to authenticate, in which I'm going to pass in grant type password and a username password, and I hit send, and it returns me an access token. Right? This is straightforward OAuth. This is how OAuth works. So I get this access token, which I then save somewhere, and then I can start calling my API. And if the URL is correct and everything is correct, what I'm supposed to do is that I'm supposed to pass an authorization header in which I pass in the access token in the format of bearer space access token. Hit send. It's a simple REST-based API, no tricks going on over here, and it returns me the title of my Office 365 site, which says TDC Rocks. OK, now let's start talking about how to use this API in a mobile app. First, what exactly am I writing? The app that I'm about to write is going to look like this. To keep things simple, it's got two screens. It's got two screens. Screen number one is a login screen, and screen number two shows me the title of my Office 365 site. Simple as that. I'm going to write this as an AngularJS SPA, single page application. As you can probably guess, you're probably thinking in your mind, for those of you who are familiar with Angular SPAs, that I guess there will be some sort of routing involved over here. I'll have to set up routes, and then I'll have three controllers. I'll have a sign-in controller, home controller, and then I'll have an index controller, for the entire app. So that's the basic logic I will need. But how am I going to handle authentication, etc.? Let's see. First, let's start setting up my project. So I'm going to fire up something called as terminal. I'm on a Mac. And let's see what directory I'm in. So I'm going to go cd document, cd developers. I like to keep all my stuff in a directory called developer. What do I have in here? So I'm going to use a framework called as Ionic. Now, I could have used pure Cordova, but the advantage of Ionic is that it gives me like a jump start, as in if I'm trying to write an iOS app, making an iOS app in pure HTML5, Ionic just makes it so much easier. And actually, there's a lot of community following behind Ionic. So let's quickly look at what that framework looks like. There are a lot of apps that have been written using Ionic, and there are some docs over here. There's a showcase. So I can go into, say, the CSS over here and say, if I want a header, this is what I use. Buttons can be done that way. I can literally just copy paste stuff out of it, and it gives me a little quick start to write a simple iOS app that looks like an iOS app and feels like an iOS app, that it feels responsive when I write it, that gives me that rubber bandy effect when I try to scroll. Right? It gives me the nice transitions without feeling like it's an HTML5 app. Doing that is very hard, but you know what? They've already done the work for me. And actually, they're also coming up with Ionic Studio, Ionic Creator, where I have the ability to create my starter app with just drag and drop. It gives me the HTML. Now, the cool thing is, obviously, because I'm writing it as an Angular SPA, it gives me Ionic is dependent on Angular. Think of it as an extension for Angular. So once I've written this app, which is pure HTML, plugging in my business logic into this should be very, very straightforward, right? So anywhere I have a UL, li, I just repeat it with an ng repeat, and bam, I have a list functional with my real data. So writing an app like this becomes, like very, very fast, very, very productive. So this is what I choose to use. I already have Ionic installed, so I'm going to use Ionic to give me a starter project. So I'll say Ionic start O365 app. And I head over here, I can specify what template I want. If I don't specify a template, it'll basically go ahead and download the latest templates for me from GitHub, and it'll give me a tab page application ready to go. So let's wait for this to finish. OK. And then I'm going to go into O365 app. And looks like it created some files over there for me. And now I can start writing this app, and let's see what it looks like. So it comes with a little server, so I can just say Ionic serve, hit enter, and it sets up a simple little web server, and it starts Safari with my app loaded in it. Now, it doesn't look very much like a mobile app yet, but you see there are tabs down there. Now, OK, now this looks like a mobile app. But how exactly do I go about debugging and developing a mobile app when I'm not on a phone? The browser I prefer to use for most of my work over there is Chrome, and that's for a very good reason, because Chrome has got the best mobile debugging tools at this point. So I'm going to open Chrome debugging tools and watch what happens. You see that the whole app changed, right? And now I can emulate iPhone 5 or whatever I want. I can set resolution. I can do landscape. I can do geolocation. I can even do network throttling if I wished. Right? So this is very, very productive. I can set up an app like that. Now at this point, I would go ahead and start writing my apps. I can even do like touch like this. So I can start writing my app, but 30 minutes, not enough time to write, 20 minutes actually. So what I'm going to do is that I'm actually going to stop this web server, and I'm going to copy in some code and then walk you through the code. So let's go ahead and, so this O365 app www, we don't need this. OK, and I'm going to pull in the code from my backup over here. Copy, copy, copy. Where are you? Copy. And I'm going to place that in www. Right click, paste. And now I'm going to come back here. I'm going to do Ionic start one more time. CDO 365 app. Yeah, you're right, serve. O365 app, Ionic serve. And again, it starts in Safari, but I prefer Chrome. So let me go back here, start this in Chrome, start debugging tools. That's Chrome, right? Start debugging tools, and reload the page to get my look and feel. OK. Now, there is another editor that I prefer to use called Brackets. And Brackets is being written by Adobe, and I can just go ahead and open that folder where my www files are inside of Brackets. So let's go ahead and open it, and then I can quickly start walking through the code. So let's close this. Right. And I can put this to the left, resize this a little bit. And now I can start, writing the code. So as you see over here, that this is the structure of my app. This is what the folder looks like under www. I have an image folder. I have index.html. So because the web server is running behind the scenes, so I can try and see where this O365 app is written. It should be somewhere. It's not here, but it should be in the views. Where are the controls? Home.html and sign title, signin.html. So let's say it says O365 and SharePoint. If I add a 1 over here, hit save, you see that it automatically refreshes on the right, and it adds SharePoint 1 on the other side. I promise you won't have to learn any SharePoint to see this. OK. So now I have the structure of my app setup. Let me quickly walk you through the structure. I have index.html, right? And in index.html, I'm using some Ionic specific things which allow me to give it like a nav bar at the top, etc. I have included references to some standard AngularJS files for routing, for local storage, etc. I have my logic in a file called app.js. And then I have a couple of other JavaScript files, etc. that I've referenced that are specific to my app. So I'm going to go into app.js first. And in app.js, the first thing I'm doing is that I'm setting up routes. You see that I have two URLs over here. One is called as signin, and the second is called as home. And they have their equivalent controllers, right? So the controllers are defined in the respective JavaScript files. So I've basically set up my routing. So if I go to my apps URL /home, then I should see the home screen load up. Similarly, if I go to /signin, I should see the sign-in screen load up. Then the next question is, how do I do authentication in this, right? So what I wanted to do is that when I'm writing the logic for this, I didn't want to have to worry about that every single request has to worry about, am I authenticated or not? And if I'm not authenticated, then go ahead and authenticate, and then remember to put this bearer request on top. What I wanted to do is that I wanted to make this process easy for the app writer. In other words, when you're writing the app, you should just be able to do $HTTP get and bam. Authentication should be taken care of for you. So what I did is down here under app config, I first enabled cross-domain request, because remember, these are just HTML files. They will be packaged with my mobile app. They're not running in the same domain as the web API on the other side. So I packaged those up in, so I need cross-domain requests. So I basically say $HTTP provider defaults use X domain is equal to true, right? So that's one thing I have to do. But then I went ahead and pushed in an interceptor, right? And what does that interceptor look like? The interceptor has got basically very simple methods. Any request that is going, it sticks the bearer header on top, right? And if for any reason I get a 401 from the server, you're not authenticated, it'll redirect you back to the login screen. Simple as that. So by doing this, I don't have to worry about authentication at all, right? Any single request I make, it'll be taken care of with this auth interceptor service. If I'm not authenticated, it'll automatically redirect me to the sign-in controller. So let's go look at the sign-in controller. See how clean our code becomes by doing this. Let's go to the HTML for the sign-in controller. Ignore all the branding at the top. The things that are interesting to us is this section over here. In this section, you see that I have two text boxes. One is a username, another is the password. And I have this interesting attribute called ngModel. So basically, behind the scenes in the controller, I'm expecting to see a variable called login data. And the login data should have a property in it called username. It should have another property called password. Those are what I'm dealing with. And down here, there is probably another property called message, like invalid username, password. We got to show that to the end user. And then there is a sign-in button with ng click of login. So I guess when I click on that, a method called login will get called. So let's go ahead and look at the login controller. What does login do? It uses something called as auth service. So there's another service that I pushed in. And that service basically logs you in. And if you're able to log in properly, then it redirects you to the home screen. And if you're not able to log in properly, it just shows you the error message. And as you can see up here, scope, login data, username, password, etc., that's all up there. So far, this is very straightforward. But see, we've done something very, very cool. What we just did is that when you write your application logic now, you don't have to worry about authentication. If somebody is trying to get around your authentication model and is trying to execute a HTTP request directly, maybe he discovers a URL link directly, you don't have to worry about protecting URL links because your entire API is protected, both on the client and the server. Security is one of those things that if you overcomplicate it, you'll end up with holes. But now because this is so simple and straightforward, it is possible for us to write an app that we can rely on. So now we can focus on our logic. So let's look at the home controller. The home controller is very simple. So basically, I just have a span in which I'm writing out the title. So you can probably guess what's going on over here. Behind the scenes, I probably have a property over here called site title. And I am in ng-init, I call a method called init. And in init, I'm probably making an HTTP call to the API behind the scenes. And that allows me to get the title, just like I did on the other side here. Right? So it's going to repeat this request, but it'll do it in a cross-domain fashion. And it'll get the title, and it'll write the title over here. And there's a sign out button, and you can pretty much guess what that does. So let's go ahead and try this out. Now, while I'm still working in Chrome, and this is Chrome, I can try this out, I can debug this, etc. So let me go ahead and try this. I'm going to go ahead and log in. So everything that I did using Postman on the other side, now I'm going to do using the app from HTML, pure HTML, no ASPX, no server-side code. And I'm going to do this using cross-domain REST API call. So let's go ahead and sign in. It's not responding. Let's try one more time. Let's go and sign in. That's better. Oh, I made a mistake. You know what? The mistake I made is, let's see. So if you look in here in my code, down here in app.js, I have some constants defined down here. And one of the constants is, well, where is that API, the IP address for it? Now, if you put this in the App Store, you're going to have to get a DNS. But I'll just work with IP addresses. So let me go ahead and find the IP address for my virtual machine. That is 8.140. So let's go ahead and put that here, 8.140. Save this. So it all refreshed it, but I'll refresh it myself just to be sure. And let's come here, and let's also see the debugger up here. And now, hopefully, when I sign in, I should be able to go to sources, app.js. I want to make sure that it picked up the latest version. I go in here. OK, so it picked up the latest version. Let's go ahead and sign in. Sign in, and TDC rocks. Right? Thanks. So, thank you. So at this time, my app is done. Now, yes, you can make it more complex, more compelling if you want. But just in sake of time, now let's look at through the process of packaging this up as an iOS app and pushing it out to app stores, et cetera, and all that. So getting it to that point, what are the next steps? My app is written. I'm going to go ahead and hit close on the browser. I'm done with brackets. Let's also close this. I'm going to quit this brackets web server. And I'm going to add support for iOS. Soon as I do that, notice that a folder will appear over here called platforms. And under platforms, it'll add a project for iOS for me. So let's go ahead and put this on the side here. And we say Ionic platform. Is it platform or platforms? I don't know. But if you're ever confused, just type Ionic, enter, it'll tell you what you need to do. So I'm going to say iOS. So it says creating iOS project. And you see on the right side, it went ahead and created a folder called platforms. And our platforms, it added a folder called iOS. So guess what it would take to create an Android project? Just type Android there. Yes, you have to set up your machine for Android development, but it's really that simple. So then I can go into iOS. I can open this Xcode project. So let's go ahead and open that. OK. And let's go ahead and run it in iPhone 6 simulator. So let's go ahead and run this. So it'll come up in a second. Here we go. Let's zoom out a little. Right. Bam. This is running in iOS simulator. There's no cheating here. I could run this on my iPhone physical device. It would look and feel exactly like this. There is no cheating here. This was pretty easy, wasn't it? It's almost too easy. It's really that easy. Let me go ahead and sign in. And it still works. It's a fully functional app, ready to go, ready to be put in an app store. Sign it with your cert, put it in the app store, send it for approval. It's at that point. Now, obviously, one of the things you might ask is, say, OK, this is great. Now, obviously, I can develop cross-platform apps. Adding Android support in here is very easy. But one of the challenges you'll see over here is that, well, what if I wanted to debug this, right? So I'll end the talk with a little tip. Debugging Cordova applications through Xcode. What is the best way to do them? So the easiest thing is that if you had a console.log, then that console.log will appear down here. Right? So that's very straightforward. But what if you wanted proper debugging? So if you actually go here into Settings, and you go into Safari, and you look for a tab called Developer, you won't see it here. Actually, it's under Advanced. But actually, you do see it here. They added this in, OK, they may have changed it recently, because I just updated Xcode recently. So they've added this here. But some of the simulators actually don't have the Web Inspector tab checked, right? Like I think if you run this in iPhone 5, you won't see Web Inspector. So what you do is that you basically go to some OS or some device that has Web Inspector, like iPhone 6 has Web Inspector, and you activate Web Inspector. Then you go back to your app and go ahead and launch the app. Hopefully I launched the right one because there were two there. Let me make sure it still works. Why is caps lock checked? Why is caps lock checked? Hopefully it'll understand with caps lock too. Yeah, I gotta love it, right? It won't work because password is not going to match. Great. Why is caps lock checked? Like I can't seem to remove it. One more time. Ah, here we go. Caps lock went off. So let's go ahead and sign in. Does it still work? Maybe. Yeah, it works. So this is the right app. So let's say if I want to debug this, right? What would I do? Go ahead and open Safari. I'm going to quit this and open it again. And here, you go to Develop. You go to iOS Simulator. See this iPad? OK, that's my Mac. So yeah, my phone says iFunny. My iPad is iFad, and this is iPad. And I come in here, and I basically tap into this index.html and check this out. So basically, over here, I have full Web Inspector. I have all the code here. app.js is here. And I can set breakpoints over here. I can start debugging this just as if this was running in a browser. And I can do this with a physical device, too, of course. That's what Web Inspector is for. Right? So debugging these apps is also fairly easy. OK. What do you think of it? It's easy to write mobile apps, right? OK, thank you very much. I'd love to take any questions at this point, and you know how to get a hold of me. Thank you.